Who do you hate, and how do you express it? Sometimes you do this with words, sometimes with their absence. This comes up a few different places. This week in the Torah, we begin reading the story of Yosef, of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph, of course, is his father's favorite, and he lords it over them, and he keeps bragging about it, as it were, to him, and he sort of he tells on them. And the Torah says, Shalom, that the brothers couldn't speak peacefully with him. They couldn't say hello to him anymore. Their hatred essentially sort of like it prevented even communication. And that reminded me of the Hanukkah story, right? As we come up on Hanukkah, there was a civil war, really. Sometimes we talk about the miracle of the lights, and sometimes we talk about the historical aspect of the story. It was really a civil war between different Jewish groups, the assimilators, those who want to blend in with a larger Greek Syrian society and drop Jewish practice, and those who want to the opposite, right? They had nothing to say to each other, and it devolves into physical fighting, right? So, Havdil, God willing, not physical fighting. I was also struck parallel by the recent incident with Peter Beinart, who's a prominent anti-Zionist writer, who went to Israel to speak to a group of Tel Aviv University students about what he believes to be genocide and the necessity of eliminating the state of Israel as a Jewish state. And he had to apologize for doing this because it was wrong to speak to Israelis, who are so far beyond the pale of what someone should speak with, that they should only be spoken of and not to, as part of his sort of like commitment to boycott Israel and Israeli institutions and people who participate in them, even though, of course, likely the people who are willing to show up to such a talk are, on some level, open to his ideas. It's not about saying something nice, about having any sort of contact, not even being able to say Shalom, not even be able to speak to someone. And this, Beinart would say, I let my desire for that conversation override my solidarity with Palestinians who, in the face of ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide, have asked the world to boycott Israeli institutions and are complicit in their oppression, right? So this is, you can't even speak to such people. That actually reminded me, that's from the left. On the right, this happens. There was an essay a couple of years ago by Gil Troy, a prominent American-Israeli professor, and Natan Sharansky, the prominent former Soviet dissident, then an Israeli cabinet minister and hero. Description of anti-Zionist Jews as un-Jews. They say we call these critics un-Jews because they believe the only way to fulfill the Jewish mission of saving the world with Jewish values is to undo the ways most actual Jews do Jewishness, meaning peoplehood and a sense of solidarity with Jews living in Israel. And if somebody is an un-Jew, of course, it sure feels like they're beyond the pale and not really worth engaging with, speaking to. So from the left-wing prohibitions on talking with Israeli Jews to the right-wing pushing out of those who disagree on core safety issues like Zionism, to the Hanukkah story's civil war among Jews of Judea, to the children of Israel not being able to speak with each other in the Torah portion, such was their hatred. We should be wary. In the Torah, of course, this story of inability to speak with each other leads to exile and slavery. In the Hanukkah story, it leads to war. In the present context, we'll see. Agreement is never required. We're not supposed to agree with each other. We're supposed to be a debating tradition. But some connection allows us to do the debate, as opposed to saying that vast swaths of the Jewish community are beyond the pale of who it's okay to speak with, such as our anger or our hatred. In the Hanukkah story, this all leads to war. In modern times, an increasing gulf between Jews, and the sad moment of a Jew apologizing publicly for speaking to Jews doesn't bode well for our ability to avoid the fate of the brothers of Joseph who are unable to speak Shalom to each other. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Urim Sameach. Have a good Hanukkah.